Hi, this is Bruce Kidd with the Kidd Consulting Group, and this is our next edition of Insights for Executives video series. I'm going to take the liberty to do something a little different today. Over the past several months, we've been fortunate to have some really terrific and talented and successful business executives and professionals come and share their insights and expertise with us on a variety of business topics. I hope you've enjoyed that series of videos, and we're going to actually relaunch them so you can see the ones that maybe you didn't see previously. What I'd like to do today is to share some thoughts that I have obtained from watching some other very talented and successful and smart people in my life. I don't profess to be a Rhodes Scholar or a Mensa. What I do believe I am is a very good listener and watcher of others. And one of the things that I've learned at my age now of 66, and it's supposed to be what happens with most of us, as you get older, you develop some wisdom. Sometimes you develop that personally through training yourself and education. Sometimes you learn it from others that are infinitely smarter or more talented or more successful if you just watch and listen. So what I'd like to share with you today are some thoughts that I think are relevant for you in running your business, that come from some really smart, talented, and really good people that I've had the pleasure to be around. And some I have not had the pleasure to be around, but I think you might find some of their words and comments interesting. So we're going to share 22 slides of things that I'd like you to think about as you continue to build and grow your company and become a better leader and CEO or CFO and employee. So let's get started. I'm a huge music fan, have been my whole life, and sometimes musical artists actually create songs or phrases in songs that resonate with us other music lovers for our whole lives sometimes, and has emotional impact on us. That's the whole idea of art. So I've got a quote here. I want to tell you, and then I'll tell you who said it, which I think you may be surprised at. You may have heard the quote, "Life is what happens to us as we're planning for the future." Gentleman that had a profound impact on the music industry since he started and until today is the author of that quote. His name is John Lennon, one of the founders of the Beatles, for those of you that are not old enough to know. Prolific, talented musical artist, and also a very thoughtful person. And I like that quote because I think it's what happens to a lot of us in business. You have to plan for the future. That's where you're going. That's your roadmap. But you can get caught up in too much planning and end up with analysis paralysis, if you will, about too many things down the road as opposed to enjoying and, as they say, carpe diem, seize today. And so what I would urge you to do is make sure that you split your brain in half and you think a little bit about the future and where your company's going and how you're going to manage and lead that, but also make sure you seize today and do the things that are important today. And as I had lunch today with a gentleman, his comment was, after he asked me how I was doing, and I returned the favor, because that's what you do, he said, "I choose to be positive." And I love that quote, because I think that's a choice that we all have a chance to make. So choose to be positive, seize the day, and make sure you take advantage of each day, and not just plan for the future. The next quote, you've also heard the author of. You may not know it's his, but I love the sentiment of this, and I think it's relevant in business. It's relevant in all of our lives. And the quote is, "Nothing great was ever accomplished without enthusiasm." The author, Ralph Waldo Emerson, prolific author, political activist, thought leader in his generation, really smart man. I love the quote because I think it's important for us as we think about building companies and leading people. I myself, and I bet you as well, you're drawn to people that have enthusiasm and passion. It's a natural instinct. And so as you and your company continue to grow and your role is more important as a leader in your company or as a key executive on the management team, enthusiasm matters. And I'll give you a perfect example of how enthusiasm helps. If you're a basketball fan, or even if you're not, you've heard the name Dick Vitale. Dick Vitale, by his own admission, was an average basketball coach, average player, never had great success in the profession as a coach, even though he had some good jobs. He made his mark as a basketball commentary person for the last 35 years, calling college basketball games. And what's the number one trait that Dick Vitale has that no one can come close to? It's enthusiasm and love and passion for what he does. You can feel it, whether you like him all the time or not, you got to admire him. Keep that in mind as you lead your company. Today's a crazy world. It seems to me we need some everyday heroes. And what do I mean by that? Common Joes and common Marys, men and women just like you, that choose to do the right things to make their companies good, but also their communities good or better. How do you do that? I believe we all have an opportunity and even a responsibility to be a servant leader. I was raised by two parents who were that. They weren't wealthy or overly successful in careers, but they taught me early on that the most important thing you can do is come to the aid of others. That's the mark that you leave in your life. That's how you're evaluated when your life is no longer here on earth. And being a servant leader is an important responsibility for all of us as business owners. The simple fact is business should be more than about making money. I get it. You have to make money to have a successful, sustainable business. But there have to be bigger things in the world than just making money in your business. So I would tell you to practice, as one of my early mentors in life told me, practice random acts of kindness and selfless acts of beauty. And I watched him do that. He didn't know I was watching, but I was. And he was a very thoughtful, kind man. And he was successful in business. But he went out of his way to be a servant leader. And I want to give you a quick example. My son recently bought a home. I was in the front yard the week he bought the home, working in his yard, because that's what dads do. That's what I do. And the neighbor across the street, whom I'd never met before, came walking across the cul-de-sac, walked up to the yard, and introduced himself. Brad Cooper, not the actor. I said, "Hey, aren't you Bruce Kidd?" I said, "Well, yeah, I am." "How do you know that?" He said, "Well, I met your son earlier. I heard his name. I've seen you on TV, and I've seen some videos of you with your Concerts for a Cause that you do, which is a series of concerts I host each year to raise money for local charities and kids and families in need." And he said, "I really like what you're doing. I would like to support you, so I'm going to write you a check that you can use however you want." Never met the gentleman in my life. He went out of his way to walk across the street, introduce himself, tell me that he appreciated that I was trying to be a good person in the community. He wrote me a check that day. I took the check. We had a concert coming up. I gave the check to an organization called Cycles for the City that Dan and Lee Dockich do for raising money to provide new bikes to kids from very low income homes around the city. I gave that money to Dan and Lee. That $2,000 that Brad gave me, with no reason for him to do it other than just being kind, will give 10 kids who would otherwise never have a new bike. It will give 10 kids new bikes this summer. That's a random act of kindness. We could use a lot more of that. One of my favorite all-time people, and I know you know this name if you don't even have to be a sports or basketball fan, also had a quote that I had no idea was from him. I'd heard the quote. "True character is illustrated by what you do when no one is watching." I love the quote. Why is it relevant for you in your business? Because people are watching. And it matters what you do and the character you have each and every day as you lead, manage, work with your employees, your customers, your suppliers, your community. Who was the author of that phrase? True character is illustrated by what you do when no one is watching. John Wooden, the famous coach of the UCLA Bruins, Indiana native, Purdue graduate, legendary coach, one of the best ever. Also a very thoughtful and kind man. I had the genuine pleasure and honor to meet him in his 80s when he was in town, and could not have been a more thoughtful, kind, generous person. Incredibly wise. And I love that character comment of his quote, because I think it matters. Character does matter. So 20 years ago, I was making a presentation to about 200 small business owners and entrepreneurs here in Indiana, actually up in Fort Wayne, Indiana. And I'm going through your typical slide deck. We were going to talk about a variety of business topics from strategy, marketing research, marketing and sales, hiring employees, finance, raising money, so on. You've all probably been in some of those presentations or seminars. I got about halfway through and I'm getting ready to talk about the whole idea of how you hire good people from my perspective of working around some successful companies. And for whatever reason, a thought came in my head and I stopped, visibly stopped, and people noticed. And I turned off the projector and I said, hey, I've got a thought for you here. I want to share it. It just came to mind and I hope it's relevant for some of you because I think it has relevance in both your personal and your business life. And I said to them, it seems to me, after being married for 25 years and having 3 kids and being in business for about 25 years as well, it seems to me that the 3 hardest things we do in our lives as human beings are, 1, being married. You can read books, you can go to seminars, you can look online now about how to be a good husband or wife. You can talk to your friends and family. At the end of the day, it's just hard work. I'm a biology major from college. I don't get to use it much, but I'm going to use it right now. The single most important trait of all human beings is that of the art of survival. We all do what it takes each day to stay upright. It's human nature. It's genetically coded in us. Being married is the time when you first experience there's something more important than me in this world, and I've got to have a relationship where it's give and take. Now, I know that those of you who are married understand that. My point is, in the business setting, it reminded me of the relationship we have with our customers. It can't be I win, you lose, because then one of us isn't upright anymore. One of us doesn't survive. It has to be the classic win-win when you're dealing with your customers. What can you do that is beneficial for them, also beneficial for you and your company? The second thing that we do that's incredibly hard, that we're not prepared for, I believe, is being a parent. Books and manuals, online, seminars, classes, counseling, it's all there. Some of it's really good. At the end of the day, when you're in your 4 walls at home with the 2.5 or 3 or 4 or 5 kids, you just figure it out each day on your own as a couple. It's just hard work. And back to survival of the fittest, you learn what each of your children needs because they're all different. We made all the classic mistakes with our first child. If he sniffled, we thought he was going to die. We're running to the doctor. By the time we had our 3rd child, Kevin, my son, if he had eaten a quarter, at the end of the day, I probably would have asked him for change. We learned to filter out what wasn't important to worry about, because you can't worry about every little thing. All you can do is your best to bring up happy, successful, productive kids. What's the business application? I think it's exactly the same as growing your business. You can't be responsible as the leader of your company or a key executive. You can't manage all the details. You have to filter out what you can focus on that's important, that actually makes the company better each day, and let everybody else deal with the other stuff. If you don't, it's exhausting. So delegate, trust other people to do that job. Again, it's like being a parent, and all those employees that are on your team for a reason, they have a role. Let them have the role and do it well. The third piece is hardest thing we do is back to the business setting for sure, and that's leading people. I've seen it firsthand from many business owners and executives and entrepreneurs, really good at their product, really good at dealing with customers, sometimes struggle with leading employees, uncomfortable, even introverted to the point where it's hard for them to lead conversations with their employees. It's not a flaw. It's a genetic trait. It is what it is. You have to deal with it. So what I would say to you from the people that I've met that were really successful, even those that were less comfortable than they'd like to be with that, just make sure, again, you lead by example. You delegate to the people that can do the jobs that you don't want to do, and build your company that way. There's a quote by Vince Lombardi that I love. He's the former legendary Green Bay Packers coach. And the Green Bay Packers ran the sweep, the halfback sweep, every other play for 5 years in the 60s. And every team knew they were going to run it when they played them. And they still couldn't stop it. And somebody asked Vince Lombardi, and I saw the video of it, Coach, what's the objective with running the in sweeps so often in a game? And he said, here's what I tell my players. Here's what I would tell you to tell your company employees and your team. What Vince said was, we search for perfection, and I will settle for excellence. I love that quote. Search for perfection knowing it's unattainable. But if you're searching for it and striving for it, excellence is a pretty good alternative. I went to an investment conference many years ago. Half the reason I went was because the keynote speaker at lunch was the legendary Warren Buffett from Berkshire Hathaway. I don't have any data to support this. Maybe the most successful investor in history. I don't know. He's remarkably successful, and his company has been. And so we're at lunch with 1,000 people, and the moderator asked Warren the most important question, which was, so Warren, tell us about your investment philosophy. How do you go about making investments, buying companies? What are you looking for? What do you do? And everybody's on the edge of their seat because they're taking notes because they're going to try and figure out how to be a Warren Buffett. What he said was, I have 2 rules. Rule number 1, invest in what you know. And he paused. He said, rule number 2, never forget rule number 1. I loved that. And people around me were looking at each other like, huh? Incredibly thoughtful and wise and simple all at the same time. Why do I bring that up? Because in your business, you have choices to make, investments to make each and every day in your products and services, and your people, and how you manage the business, how you plan for the future. And I would suggest that what you do is what Warren said he does in investing. Focus on what you know. Don't get enamored with shiny objects of other opportunities or other things you could be doing, because it takes away the focus, and focus is everything in a business. CFO friend of mine who might be one of the best CFOs, if not the best in the city. Many years ago, I was talking to him about his success in building companies and taking a couple of them public, well, along with another team. He didn't do it by himself. And I said, what's the key from your perspective? And what's the challenge for a lot of businesses that are growing and have some potential? He said, the owners and the management team need to understand very simply that profits don't pay the bills. Cash does. And I said, really? He said, cash flow management is everything to a growing business. If you don't manage it, you could end up not having a business for very long, which was, I was taken aback by that. That was his most important message. But I've never forgotten it. That was many years ago. I've never forgotten it. And so my plea to you, if you're a CEO or president, that numbers are a little less comfortable for you and you don't have a CFO you can rely on, get somebody that's comfortable with the cash flow, the cadence, if you will, of your company, because every company has a cadence of operations, cash coming in, cash going out, and paying the bills. Cash flow is king. So I've had the opportunity to be around some very successful companies, both high-tech and low-tech, that were very successful at continuing to build their customer base. New customers, getting more from existing customers, which is absolutely the key for future growth. And what I learned from them is that they didn't really sell stuff. Well, they did, but what they did was solve problems. If you want a sustainable growing business, and I know many companies struggle with having the right or the best sales force that they want to have. I've talked to countless owners of businesses that tell me that that's their number one challenge. They have some decent salespeople, they might even have a shining star, but overall, the performance is just not there, and they really don't know how to do anything about it. Well, the number one thing you can do as a team is to not sell stuff, solve problems for people. If you're solving problems, even the most uncomfortable, unsophisticated, lack of experienced salesperson can get comfortable with solving problems. They don't feel like they're selling anymore. And that's really important. And it's important to know that people buy emotionally. We all do. Think of what you buy around your home, around your business. People buy emotionally. And what does that mean? It means that you have to find a way in subtle or very real ways of making people's lives easier or better with whatever you're selling. Accounting services, financial services, widgets. It's all the same. Along with that, I spent 10 years at Walker Information here in Indianapolis, a market leader in customer analytics, obtaining the real insights on customers of medium-sized to very large companies for a couple of key reasons. We want to keep them as customers, and we want to grow those accounts if we can. That's fundamental, like we just talked about. And what I learned from that period of time in talking with some very talented customer, we'll call it customer experience managers in some very successful companies is you can't know too much about your customers. And we're talking about Fortune 50 to Fortune 500 companies, probably much larger than yours. They had the same issue that you do. We need to truly understand what drives the relationship with our customers because we need to keep them and we need to get more share of wallet from them, more buying from them if we can, infinitely easier than going out and finding a new customer, which is 7 to 10 times harder, both in time and investment. So what those companies did that was really profound and successful, and what I would urge you to do, is find a way to get real information from your customers, unbiased information. You may not want to send the sales guy or the account manager out to those accounts because the responses are going to be biased based on that relationship. You may want to hire somebody to help you get some customer analytics. What you're really trying to understand is the relationship and the behind the scenes activity or sentiments of that line item you see of customer A that spent $412,000 with us last year. Boy, I hope they spend $450 this year. Well, why? Why would they do that? And do you know what drives their relationship and their selling or their buying with your company? You cannot know too much about your customers, and you have to be very open to any or all feedback. It's the only way to get better. So I was raised by parents I told you about earlier, very thoughtful, kind parents. And my dad's mom, my grandma Kid, was an adopted child, moved here with her family. She did not graduate from high school, but she was street smart and also very thoughtful and kind. And she told me one time, I was 10 or 11 years old, and maybe I was talking a little bit more than Grandma wanted me to. I don't tend to do that, but maybe I did when I was 10 or 11. And she said, "Son, God gave you 2 ears and a mouth for a reason." And I remember her pausing for a moment to let it sink in to a 10 or 11-year-old's feeble brain. And she said, "Because you're supposed to listen twice as much as you talk. 2 ears, 1 mouth." And why is that important? Because the only time you can actually learn something is when you're listening, not when you're talking. When you're talking, you're telling other people what you already know. The only way to get better in this life is to listen, and listen a lot. I would urge you, as your business continues to evolve and grow, learn all you can about your employees, about your customers, about your suppliers, about your community by listening. 2 ears, 1 mouth. Along with that, this one's a little hard for me, but I'm going to share it anyway. I lost a very dear friend around Thanksgiving. He died way too early in life. He was a business owner here in town. Second generation, there is now a third generation, his son taking over. Wonderful person, kind, generous, thoughtful. But what he was more than anything was an incredibly active listener with every single person he met. And his objective, he would never tell you this, but I know that it was who he was. His objective was to make you, when he was talking with you, feel like the most important person in the world at that moment. Literally, the most important person to him in the world. And he did it every single time he met with you. And it became profoundly evident when we read all of the wonderful comments about him at his service back in November. And it was always that. Every single person commented about how wonderful he made them feel, whether they're having a great day or a bad day, whether he hadn't seen them in 6 months or a week, it was always the same. Why do I bring that up? Because it's important as you go through life, inside your company and outside your company, to be an active listener. You have an opportunity each day to interact with dozens, if not hundreds of people, and making each of them feel like the most important person in the world has profound impact. It did on me. It's a tough world right now, finding enough employees and finding the employees we want or need in our businesses. I happen to be with the CEO of almost $1 billion company. I was fortunate to be able to go visit him with some others on kind of a tour of his facility and to hear him talk a little bit about how he built the company. He was third generation CEO. And someone asked him, 1,000 employees now in the company, how do you go about finding the employees you need? And he said, well, I'm the last line of interviewing. I literally interview every single person that we hire, which I know it sounds crazy and maybe a little overbearing and daunting, but it's that important to me that I want to hire every single person. I want to say in the hire of every single person. And I won't ever not hire somebody if the rest of my team likes them, but I want to have a chance to visit with them. Oh, that's really interesting. So, well, what are your guidelines? What do you go by when you hire people? He said, I don't know that it's politically correct today, but I only use 2 things when I hire people. I hire for character and work ethic. I can train someone with those 2 traits. I can train them to do about anything I need in this company and give them a productive opportunity for their future growth, but also being successful in my company. I love that. Hire for character and work ethic. Sometimes it's just simple stuff. Back in the 90s, the Inc. 500 list of fastest growing companies was a really interesting document to see each year and see how many Indiana companies were on the list, because it was dominated, as you would expect, by the East and West Coast, even in the 90s for sure. But every year, Indiana would have 3 or 4 or 5 companies out of 500. And I went to a luncheon one time, and the keynote speaker at lunch was the CEO of a company here in central Indiana that had been on the Inc. 500 list 7 straight years, which is remarkable. Now, when you're going from 0 revenue to $1 million, you're going to get on the list. And when you go from $1 million to 3 or 4 or 5 million, you're going to be on the list. But getting from 5 million to 50 and then 50 to 100, most of you know that's tough. So the fact that he was on the Inc. 500 list for 7 years straight was pretty remarkable. And he talked about it at lunch. And somebody asked him, it sounds awesome, but what's the downside? Is there any downside for being that kind of high growth company for that sustained a period? And he said, absolutely. Let me tell you the downside of being that kind of growing company. That kind of growth that quickly breaks things. It breaks people, it breaks processes, and it can break your company. And so you have to be very mindful of how you maximize your performance of all your employees, maximize their productivity, if you will, to sustain that growth, but not overburden everybody with too much work to do in too little time, or too much sales with not enough cash coming in, or processes that aren't up to speed for the kind of growth you have and all the new employees and functions that you have in your company. So manage growth. It's a good problem to have, but it's one to be mindful of. One of my early mentors in business was a very interesting guy. He'd moved here from Michigan, and I happened to end up working with him, and he ended up sort of being my mentor without even knowing it. I'm 29, 30 years old, and he was 60. He'd had a much more interesting and expansive business and personal life than I had at that point. And I asked him about one of his previous jobs that he had alluded to. He ran a research facility with 30 scientists, engineers, PhD types. And they were working on big projects for large customers. New product development, new product testing, new product ideation, just starting with new ideas. Brilliant people working in labs, working on projects. And he told me one day he noticed that as smart as all these guys were and as busy as they were every day, they weren't getting projects done. And he was starting to hear from the customers, hey Bill, when's this new product testing going to be done? We started a year ago. And so finally he realized, and looking at all the projects, and they had dozens going on at one time, they weren't getting done. And he knew it wasn't because there wasn't talent or passion or even the drive of these engineers, PhDs and scientists. So he sat them all down one time at lunch and said, guys, I've got something to share that I hope we can implement going forward. He said, I need you to understand there's a subtle but very important distinction between being active, busy all day. You get here at 8, you leave at 6. Man, am I tired. I was busy all day, working. Being active and being productive. Same amount of time, but I worked on the stuff that was really important versus the stuff that felt urgent. Tasks versus strategy. And he had to share that with them, and he said once they got it, they started to delegate things that weren't as important, that weren't as urgent as they thought, and focus on the stuff that really mattered. They started getting projects done. My point is, it happens every day in all of our businesses. We're all ADD today. I blame the internet. Call me a grumpy old man. Everybody's ADD today because we want things instantly. Instant communication. Instant everything. And the fact of the matter is the world doesn't work that way in most businesses, in most people's lives. So focus on production versus active. I, like a lot of kids here in Indiana, grew up playing basketball. Grew up in a basketball family. And I played high school basketball here in Indianapolis at North Central High School. I looked a little different then, by the way. But I was still 5'10", not particularly quick. I thought I understood the game, pretty good shooter. I knew how to get other people involved. I was a point guard, and that was my job. So, our coach at the time, in 1973 to 75, when I was there, was Arlen Licklider. Arlen Licklider had a son named Todd, who was a Division I basketball coach and played at the same time I did at North Central. But Coach Licklider had what he called the 4 Ds of success as a team. Here's how we're going to be successful as a team and as a program long term. And he talked about the 4 Ds a lot. He was a smart basketball coach. The 4Ds, I knew they came from somewhere. They weren't his. He was an avid reader. And I knew they came from somewhere. I just didn't know where. And the 4Ds of success are desire, dedication, discipline, determination. He would write them on the whiteboard. He'd write them on the whiteboard before every game to make sure that we understood it's those 4Ds that are going to make us successful. So who was the author of that phrase, that quote, that mindset? Jesse Owens, the legendary track and field star of the 30s. Wonderful man and successful in every fact of his life. That's where that came from. And I've never forgotten it. And I think it's applicable. In fact, we did a video recently in this series where we talked about some of the comparisons between basketball, strategy, philosophy, success, and business philosophy and success. And those 4Ds we talked about. It works in your business too. Desire, dedication, determination, and discipline. I've been around some very successful CEOs and business owners. It's been a real blessing to meet these talented men and women. And I've noticed subconsciously that they had a couple traits that were very similar. And those two were, they had two key abilities, if you will. And I don't mean skill sets. Their two key abilities that they shared with everyone around them were availability and vulnerability. Availability, open door, you got an issue, come and talk to me. I'm here all the time. I want to know what you need, what you think, how you can be successful. 2, vulnerability. I don't mean being soft or giving in to everybody. I mean being humble and honest each and every day. Understanding, a friend of mine once told me, I take what I do for a job very seriously. I don't take myself very seriously. And that's what I think of when I think of humility and vulnerability. Very serious what you do in building companies and leading people. It's an awesome responsibility and it's an awesome job. But there's a certain level of humility and openness and honesty that I think is required to be really good at it. And I hope most of you are doing that already. I met with another CEO who's been in one of these video series in the past. And I asked him about, he's retired, sold the company, retired, semi-retired. He serves on boards. He's a really smart man. As good a man as you're ever going to meet. His name is Will Davis. And he talked about the big why. What he learned after building companies, selling them, leading several hundred employees at a time, rounding out management teams, working with investors. The big why is important to him. And I asked him what that was. And he says, it's the big question we all have in life. Why am I here? Why am I on earth? What's my purpose? What's my role? What am I going to do that makes a difference? He said, I think every business owner and business executive, even every person to some level, should ask themselves, what's the big why for me? How do I build a life of excellence and in the business setting, a culture of excellence where we have a bigger goal than just here? I really like that. You should take a look at his video that we did a couple weeks ago, if you haven't already. Back in the 80s and 90s, when tech was really starting to take off and Silicon Valley was the hotbed, obviously, I had an opportunity to be at a program where one of the keynote speakers was a gentleman named Guy Kawasaki. Guy Kawasaki was the self-proclaimed, maybe it was actually his job title on a business card, I don't know, but he was a self-proclaimed chief evangelist for Apple. Now, you couldn't have a more prominent, highly visible, sought-after position than that with that company in that time frame. And he was a very interesting, smart, eclectic. I don't even like that word, but he was just everywhere, his thought process. But he said something at lunch that I won't forget. And I think it's important for all of us. He said, and when he said it, the whole crowd sort of looked in bewilderment because they didn't know what he was talking about. He said, I want all of you to think about being a mensch. I didn't know what a mensch was. I know the three guys sitting next to me at the table didn't know what a mensch was. He said, I know, you don't know what a mensch is. Let me define it for you. It's a Yiddish term, and it means, it's the profile of someone who has high character, wisdom, kind and thoughtful, and cares about helping others. They've had their life, they've been successful. Now their objective is, how do I help others be just as successful? Be a mensch. I've never forgotten that. And I think it's an important role for all of us, in our neighborhood, in our businesses, in our communities. Be a mensch. And once you have that profile, eminently valuable for you personally. I was with another CEO recently, and he made a comment. I asked him about how he plans his future. I was just curious, how far out do you think? What do you think about? He said, you know what, I've done that, and I think there's value in that. He said, what I do now is because it level sets me and it focuses me on what I think is really important. I want to build a successful company. I want to hire good people. I want them to have successful careers, build wealth, take care of their families. I want to solve problems for customers. I want to do all that. But my focus, when I wake up each morning, the first thought, after giving thanks for being alive and having a family, he said, my first thought every day to myself is, what can I do to make someone's life better? Might be a subtle gesture, might be a phone call, a note. It might be buying somebody lunch. It might be solving somebody's really big problem. And his comment after that was, you never know when you reach out to someone in need, or you just reach out to someone that you feel like you can help, you never know when you're going to change somebody's life. And how awesome is that? And you're not going to every time, but once in a while you might. Nothing greater in the world than that. I thought that was really interesting. And he's still building his company. Don't get me wrong. He's not retired. He's not taking the gas off the pedal trying to build a company. But he level sets himself each day with that thought. And the second part of that is, he said, that's really my legacy. When I'm not around anymore and people ask, hey, what was Bill like? He said, I want them to think about that I built a great company. I was a kind and thoughtful man. I was a servant leader. I helped others. And, I was pretty successful. That's my legacy. I want that to be a positive thing. And my question to you is, what do you want your legacy to be beyond day to day? When my three kids were in grade school, this one's one of those personal ones for me again. I'll try and get through it. I wanted to be a good dad. We all want to be good dads, the men. I was at breakfast one morning with my kids. They were in 6th grade, 4th grade, 2nd grade, I think, all getting ready to go to school together. And I'm thinking, gosh, what can I tell them that would be important for them to think about? Hey, thanks, Dad. Or might be helpful to them in just thinking about how they spend their day. And it just came to me. I don't know, it's not particularly profound, but I will tell you that those kids are now 36, 33, and 31. And they have their own kids, and they use the same phrase with their kids. It evidently stuck. Now, maybe it's because I told them that every day for like 25 years, but it stuck, and I'm glad that it did. And here's why I think it's important, because I think it's relevant for you. Irregardless of your role in a company or in your life, I think it's important for all of us to think about it. Your job is what I told them at breakfast that morning. Your job today is to be good, have fun, learn something. And here's what I meant. Be a good person. Fundamental. You just have to be a good person. You have to have fun. If you're not having fun, you're doing it wrong. I don't care if it's sports, business, euchre club, whatever you're doing. If you're not having fun, you're doing it wrong. Life's too short. Have fun. Everything. Take the challenges, embrace them, breathe in, breathe out, move on, have fun. And the third one is learn something new every day. You'd be amazed at what you can learn if you just watch and listen and ask people that are smarter than you. I didn't say this earlier. I didn't want to sound condescending, but I also learned from a lot of really successful business leaders, not just the CEO or president. Surround yourself with people smarter than you. Back to that humility, just surround yourself with people with really smart, thoughtful minds, and you'll be infinitely rewarded for that. And it's back to the third piece that I told my kids: learn something each day. If you do those three things, I believe you're going to have success. I bring that up because I'd like to finish with a quote from another author, songwriter that I particularly admire. And that quote is from James Taylor. Most of you probably know James Taylor. A line from one of his songs that I particularly like is, "The secret of life is enjoying the passage of time." And I think that's oh so true, and it became oh so more true today at lunch when I talked with my friend Ted. So I hope that this commentary of smart people's thoughts and ideas and experiences that I've been blessed to witness firsthand, and then sprinkling in a couple of my own thoughts, are helpful to you. And what I would tell you is, at the end of the day, make it a good day. Be well, be happy, be successful. As Vince Lombardi told his team, in your life, search for perfection, but settle for excellence. Make it a great day every day. Thanks for the time. I hope this was helpful. I look forward to talking to some of you very soon. See ya.